Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting of the Cabinet. I'm Councillor Perai Ahmet, Leader of the Council. For the public record, we have Cabinet members here tonight, as well as a number of senior officers. Some non-Cabinet members are also present, and additional officers are also here and joining the meeting virtually online. If any virtual attendees wish to speak, if they could please indicate with their yellow hand icon, and we will pick this up in the meeting. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. Can I please ask Cabinet members to introduce themselves and state their portfolio area, and any other speakers, when you do speak, if you can, please introduce yourself and state your job title and who you are. If I can start with Councillor Brabazon.
Zena Brabazon, Cabinet Member, Children's Schools and Families.
Sarah Williams, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning.
Donna Carlin, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
I'm Emily Arkham, the Cabinet Lead for Culture and Leisure.
Mike Hikata, Climate Change, Climate Action, Environment and Transport.
AjdaOvat, Cabinet Member for Communities.
Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for Placemaking and the Local Economy.
Seema Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Resident Services and Tackling Inequality.
Lucia Desneves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Thank you all. Richard, do we have any apologies for absence?
Not received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business tonight. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can Cabinet members please indicate if they have a declaration of interest to make tonight? No declarations of interest. Okay. Item 5, notice of intention to conduct business in private. Any representations received and the response to any such representations. So there were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. Item 6, which are the minutes. Can we please confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October 2025 as a correct record? Item 7, deputations, petitions and questions. There were none received. Item 8, matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I believe we have Councillor Small online. He's online. Okay. So Councillor Small, when you're ready, if I can hand over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I should start off by saying that this review is none of my hard work, and so I want to make start with a massive thanks to Councillor Worrell, my predecessor as chair of the Housing Planning and Development Scrutiny Panel, for all her efforts and those of the committee pulling this review together, as well as to the experts that gave evidence to effectively contribute to making the review as strong as I think it is. I think, just as a short introduction, I won't repeat the main basis of the report, but I think the issues of temporary accommodation are well rehearsed, and that the housing crisis that is biting, particularly in London and up and down the country, Haringey is not immune from it, and that is having quite an immense impact on our residents, and felt probably most acutely by some of our most vulnerable residents at some of the most vulnerable times in their lives. The Scrutiny Committee thought that they would be able to add most value to the council at this time, as it was looking to effectively redevelop its temporary accommodation placements policy and the private rental sector discharge policy. And so the review was held in order to try and tease out as many improvements on pressures as possible. There are obviously 13 recommendations, but I think some of the key ones are that, number one, sort of genuine transformations of this crisis are going to come from issues that are outside of the council's remit. And will instead result from lobbying to government and working in partnership with some of our, I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Yeah, the the main changes would come from outside of government, outside of the council's remit, and by lobbying to national government. The two other areas are the duty of care that the council accepts when it is making a placement, and the wraparound care that is necessary. And thirdly, on the recommendations on the impact of or the outsized impact on minority groups, and particularly those in vulnerable circumstances and situations, no least to those survivors of domestic violence. I think just to conclude there, just say that the review wanted to underline just how they felt that the evidence given from officers and from the council made clear that the council is very clearly aware of just how much of an impact this crisis is having on our residents, and that officers were working as hard as possible to try to mitigate those impacts, and that the recommendations we were trying to make, whilst not quite the sizable transformation we all might wish for, are intended to try to help to improve those pressures and try to relieve the pressures that our residents feel in these circumstances. Thank you.
Seems like. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Small. Apologies, it was a bit glitchy at points, so you might have heard some interference there, but thank you. If I could now ask Councillor Williams to respond, please, to the recommendations.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Small for that introduction, which is a fairly comprehensive outline of the recommendations and the help really that the Housing Planning and Development Scrutiny Panel has given when we will be shaping the allocation policy, and also more broadly about the impacts of for families of living in temporary accommodation, and what we can do to minimise disruption to their lives through their placements. So I'm really keen for Cabinet colleagues to agree to these recommendations, so that they can be considered as part of the policy review work, and the recommendations that don't fall into that particular remit will also form how we conduct the allocation and more broadly placements going forward as well. So it's actually a very helpful review. So just if you could pass my thanks to the panel.
Thank you. Do any Cabinet members have any questions on the report for Councillor Small? You've stunned them into silence, Councillor Small. It's good. Okay, do Cabinet members have any questions for Councillor Williams on her response to the scrutiny recommendations? No? Okay. Councillor Cooley-Harrison also has no questions. That's good. It's an excellent report. There you go, Councillor Small. Thank you for joining us tonight. So if we can now move to recommendation and agree to the response to the recommendations, which is set out at Appendix 2, pages 59 to 67, I believe. Are we all in agreement? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you again. So if we move to item 9, which is the draft 26 to 27 budget and 26 to 31 medium-term financial strategy report, if you can please introduce Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Leader. Setting the budget in Haringey gets more challenging every year due to why is noise? Sorry about that. Due to historic government underfunding, which we're all aware of, following decisions taken initially by the coalition government in 2010, which changed the funding formula and took money away from boroughs such as Haringey, and carried on underneath the Tory government at the time. We now operate with around £143 million less in real terms of core government funding than we did in 2010-2011. And this is in a budget, in a borough where we know that we have amongst the highest levels of deprivation in the country. and where we have wards we have the highest number of wards with high levels of deprivation in the whole of London. At the same time as this budget reduction, we are seeing rising demand and have seen rising demand for our services, and those services now cost more to provide. Haringey has been making year-on-year efficiency savings since 2010, and spending reductions and increases with spending reductions. And we've also been increasing income wherever we can. But despite this, we have been in receipt of exceptional financial support from the government to set the budget for 25-26. We're not the only local authority in the country facing these pressures, and we do face unique financial problems, though, which is that our government grant is 15% less than the national average. Our income tax is lower. We have a band C instead of band D average, and we've been funded with less funding than some of our neighbouring boroughs in so-called inner London, who received higher levels of funding than we did. Now, we completely understand that this new Labour government is never going to be able to reverse years of austerity overnight, and has been left with acute financial problems across government, and has the need to prioritise where spending is made. But we have, as a council, have had constructive conversations, both officers having conversations, but also political lobbying about the proposed fair funding model for local government that has been proposed. The impact of the initial proposals that have been are set out in this report, but we are hopeful that the lobbying that has been done is going to change some of the assumptions that we made when the initial proposals went out to consultation. However, it will not change drastically our financial position at the moment. Our draft budget for 26-27 does not contain a high number of new savings proposals, but it must be seen in the context of already agreed savings, both for this financial year and for next financial year, which services have already agreed to make. And so those savings will be made this year and next year, and it's very important that they are actually achieved. But given in light of that, there are few frontline savings that are outlined in this report. However, what also must be recognised is that the council is going through a root and branch relook at how money is spent within the council, and there is also, of course, our financial recovery plans that we have in place to reduce unnecessary spending, if there is I wouldn't really call it unnecessary spending, but any spending that we can avoid, and that is also happening within the council. We have to also remember that more than 80% of our service budget is spent on social care and temporary accommodation, and that is, a very, very high percentage, and it's in those areas of social care and temporary accommodation that we're still seeing a growth in demand and in need, service-led growth in demand in terms of the numbers of people and the cost of looking after adults and children and securing temporary accommodation. So while those areas are not exempt from the need to achieve best possible value for money, and work is being done across all services to look at every pound, it does mean that most of our spend, it's harder to reduce costs when most of our spend is actually spent on meeting our legal obligations in these areas. However, this year, what we are putting forward 7 million of new proposals, in addition to the more than 15 million, as I said, that is already going to be delivered for next year. We are, and we will, while relentlessly focusing on the savings that we've already agreed. And all of this is necessary because what we have to do is reduce the amount of exceptional financial support that we use. We recognize that it's not a sustainable position. And although the government's model for dealing with local authority funding crisis up and down the country is to encourage councils to use exceptional financial support. It is borrowing for revenue. The exceptional financial support is borrowing money for us to use for revenue, and that money does have interest implications and does have to be repaid. Despite all the challenges in this budget, the budget reflects our values, which is to, as always, to support our most vulnerable residents and to support the services and facilities that our residents rely on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. Is there any questions from the Cabinet to Councillor Carlin? Councillor Hekata.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carlin. You mentioned exceptional financial support, EFS, and I think that will be of interest to quite a number of people just to understand, I guess, in simple terms, what it is, what we are actually getting ourselves involved with, and what our approach is to EFS as a council. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Exceptional financial support, EFS, is effectively primarily a capitalisation directive, which allows us to use capital both from borrowing and from disposal or raising money, but disposals, to use that for revenue. And what we will be doing as a council this year and next year is using some of both. But it is a capitalisation directive. Unfortunately, the government doesn't give us the money back. And the things that we're doing really, and that the council is doing, is there is it was called Financial Recovery Plan, and possibly now, as the paper says, Financial Sustainability Plan, but which is to really bear down across the council on all costs. So we now have a spend control panel that looks at all non-essential spending has to go to the spend control panel, and that has avoided directly from the panel going on for towards £1 million, but also will have the effect of officers being very careful before they actually ask for the money spent, because as it's become embedded, no longer really challenging whether that money needs to be spent, and all spend in the same way now has the oversight of directors to make sure that it is spent. We also have been, as some of you may know, really pushing down and focusing on the number of agency workers that we have had in Haringey. We used to be an outlier in terms of the numbers, that we had higher numbers than other boroughs. I'm pleased to say that's no longer the case. And if anybody is interested in looking it up, there's a paper that goes to General Purposes Committee. The last one went in October, which actually has the figures, the exact figures on on how much agency workers have come down. And if you'll wait for a minute, I can tell you. So so in terms of agency numbers, for example, the figures of agency workers, the head count went down from September 2024 to June 2025. The head count went down from 527 agency workers to 357 agency workers. And you can see these are substantial reductions. These aren't just a few members of staff. The interims and consultants numbers went down from 68 to 56 in the same period. Again, these are big reductions in numbers, and that's being done by a combination of asking people to become permanent members of staff, or alternatively, really looking at where we can reduce our agency costs. So we're looking at that, but everything across the council, pound for pound, in terms of contracts, in terms of procurement, in terms of staffing, in terms of spend, everything is being looked at to make sure that every pound is spent wisely. But unfortunately, where we are, when 80% of service spend is spent on our statutory demand-led service, that does mean it makes it very difficult for us, council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. Anyone else got any questions? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Councillor Collin. The report cites the KPMG report, which references the council's historic inability to realise the savings proposals annually. So what work are you doing as the lead member to improve on this going forwards, given there's a much bigger emphasis on realising savings versus the new proposals? And then, despite the size of the gap for the coming year, there are limited new savings proposals or ideas being put forward. So is that kind of an indication that there are no further savings kind of available? I know you're saying that you're doing a root and branch look, but have proposals been put to you by officers that you've chosen not to pursue, or they've not been worked up enough, which would obviously reduce the amount of EFS that would have to be looked at? And then finally, we're now, as a council, or our finances are now in one of the worst positions of all London boroughs. So, and the Labour government set to reduce our funding further in the fair funding formula, so-called fair funding formula. So we're looking at close to £100 million budget gap for the next year. So as the lead cabinet member for quite a number of years now, what personal responsibility do you take for the financial position that we are in?
Thank you, Councillor Luke Corley-Harrison. Thank you. What are we doing and what am I doing? Savings, the savings proposals that have been put forward, officers have been checking directorate by directorate to really look at whether those savings are achievable and aren't, because sometimes proposals have been put forward with the best of intentions, but in actual fact circumstances change, and so those savings then aren't realised. And to look at if those savings can't be realised, what else we can do to find those savings. So as cabinet, not just me, but as cabinet, we are responsible for the savings within our areas, and collectively we watch and we monitor and look at the savings that we are have put forward for delivery. If I can pass over to Torrin, who will give you an indication of, on the officer side, the kinds of things that they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we have consciously recognised in terms of our ability to deliver savings, and you see that within our finance reports that come through in the kind of the quarterly monitoring, and therefore we have also consciously made kind of come to the conclusion that actually that's where we need to focus our time and attention. So although there is only 7 million of new savings in total that's put forward for 26-27, there is actually a total of 21.9 million of savings that are planned for 26-27 from previously approved, which is not an insignificant number on top of the 30 million that we are due to deliver in the current year. And you can see from the Q1 report, the Q2 report that will come in December, there are some at risk. So, you know, the totality of those almost 52 million of savings, we're going to focus and make sure that we absolutely are on track to deliver those by the end of 26-27. There are some internal improvements that we're putting in place as well at the moment. So much greater scrutiny on not just the financial savings that are delivered, but also that we are making the changes that we said that we would do to deliver the savings. So quite often we may deliver a saving by an alternative way, by often called a mitigation. Actually, you can see from the figures in the report in front of us tonight, actually we need both. We actually need, you know, the original saving and how that was going to be delivered, as well as if there are mitigations. So we've got a much tighter grip on that, and we will see that come through the monitoring reports in year. The figures that you see here tonight, so the 57 million gap, assumes that we deliver all of those savings in full. So, you know, that is really where we're going to put our time and energy over the next 6 months. Really, to get the full year impact for next year, we need to be starting to think about those changes now, and just really holding each other to account for those. So there are some internal, you know, a much tighter grip, both from an officer perspective and then equally from the cabinet member.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. As to your further question, are there any further savings available that we've chosen not to pursue? Yes, and I would like to be very clear about this. We take political decisions about supporting services and supporting our residents, and those are political choices. When we choose to keep all of our libraries open, that's a political choice. That is because us, as an administration, with Perai as leader, we make those decisions. Not because officers tell us, oh, you have to keep every library open. No, these are political choices. When we choose to invest in our playgrounds, when we choose to do the things to protect our most vulnerable residents, these are political choices that we make, and that this administration makes for the health of our borough, for the well-being of our residents, and to make Haringey the fantastic place it is to live. So yes, are there other proposals that come forward? Yes, of course there are. That is the nature of budget setting. But the decisions that we take and the decisions of which proposals we refuse, those are political decisions that we take as an administration. So yes, there are. Then in terms of London and our financial position, and do I take personal responsibility for it? No, I don't. And the reason that I don't is because Haringey has been particularly badly served, as we know and as we bring up. When the funding formula for local government was changed by the coalition government of which the Liberal Democrats was part of, and I don't remember what it was actually sold for, it was something like plastic bags, 10p price on plastic bags or something ridiculous. But when that decision was taken, Haringey had to make huge numbers of cuts at the time. And some of those things, we are seeing the results of those decisions. We cut preventative services. We cut our entire youth service. Some of those things have led to the position in terms of the rising need that we see in Haringey today. And yes, we have a poor financial position, I completely agree, but we have very high levels of deprivation and high levels of need. And our financial position is driven by our needs. particularly adult social care. Children's social care, we're doing brilliantly, and the figures have been primarily stable. But in adults, we are still seeing numbers of people coming to us who need support, and those numbers go up. In terms of temporary accommodation, we are a borough where 40% of our residents live in private sector accommodation. They have all been losing their homes as landlords want to triple the rents and kick people out. So the financial position that Haringey is in, I absolutely refute, is because we are a badly run council, or because and I'm not for an instant saying that everything we get is right, absolutely not. But I absolutely refute the fact that our financial position is because we are not a well-run council. Our financial position is because of the circumstances and the cuts that we have had in this borough that since 2010. And we have to remember that 80% of our service budget goes on social services and temporary accommodation, 80%. So the amount that we have to play with in terms of discretion is limited. And you know, and what it means is that the transformational change that we have to go through to reduce spending in the longer term has to be really smart. We can't just cut services, because that's not going to save us any money.
Thanks. Hopefully you can make that point to your Labour government.
Now, Councillor Harrison. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution as set out in 3.1 of the report, it is on page 73 of the agenda. Do we all agree? Item 10, which is approval to tender a JCT design and build contract for the Kings Road car park site. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So the report is seeking Cabinet to approve to progress the development of the Kings Road car park site, which is at the back of St James's Place and N17, as part of our Council House delivery programme. So we are committed, as everyone in this room knows, to delivering 3,000 new council homes by 2031. This is in response to the significant and growing demand for genuinely affordable housing in this borough. This commitment forms a central part of our strategy to address the housing crisis and improve outcomes for residents in housing need. The Kings Road car park scheme will contribute to this target by delivering 9 new council homes at social rent. The scheme has been designed to make efficient use of underutilised council-owned land while enhancing the surrounding environment and supporting inclusive neighbourhood development. And this project reflects the council's wider approach to placemaking, delivering high-quality, sustainable homes that meet local needs and contribute positively to the character and functionality of the area. And also because all 9 of these homes are 4-bed, sort of townhouse-style homes, it means they will be hopefully quite suitable for adaptation in our bespoke home programme, where we're perhaps struggling to get the sort of layout of a home that because we normally have flats, if I make myself clear. So this is to have a big townhouse is really unusual in our scheme. This is going to be such a beautiful place to live. The landscaping it looks like it will be really good, and looking forward to getting on site and getting on with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for your report. I'm really pleased to see this development coming forward, and especially the size of the houses, which I think would be really, really beneficial. I think there was another additional thing which maybe you can elaborate on, which has been the site itself has been a disused site, and I think it's been, you know, an area where there's been quite a bit of antisocial behaviour, and I think the local residents will really welcome the fact that we will be transforming a sort of derelict area that is, you know, been sort of quite difficult to live with if you live close by, to something that is of benefit for the existing residents as well as the new tenants that will move in. So I think that should be, you know, part of one of the many reasons, as if, you know, building 9 townhouses wasn't enough. I think that will have an added benefit. I don't know if that's more of a comment than a question, but it wasn't something that you mentioned in your introduction.
Thank you.
It's not a very pleasant place currently, that's for sure. I wouldn't say it's unused. It's just maybe not used for anything that is very pleasant. And yes, I think residents have been broadly welcoming during the engagement sessions for this. Basically, it is a massive investment in an underinvested area, as well as providing homes.
Questions? No. I was going to say, Robbie, you're to answer. Councillor Harrison, Cooley Harrison.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. So this one's still subject to go through planning. That's right, isn't it? Are you planning to tender before you obtain the planning permission, or on the assumption of approval, or is this to go to tender after determination? First question. There's also been some council schemes that have obtained planning permission and then they've never, for whatever reason, been able to proceed to development. So I'm just wondering about the timeline for this, whether the plans are to commence immediately with this one, or whether this joins sort of like a queue, or how that's working with other schemes that you've got permission for but aren't mobilising, and then how the contract will be monitored again to ensure it's coming in on budget, the specification, or the budget aligns with the specification as you originally set it out, sort of regardless of what, you know, external factors might come into play as we've seen over the recent years.
I'll start and then probably bring Robbie in if that's okay. So we do now on some of the schemes run the 2 processes concurrently in order to meet funding timeframes, but if planning isn't received, then obviously the scheme falls in that form anyway. Extant permissions, I think all of those have a progression pipeline, but I'll let Robbie come in on that. Contract monitoring. These what are they called? Joint contract tribunal design and build contract. The idea is that we have in it as the employer the specification, and the tender goes out to the contractors to say what they could build for that set, and it's up to them. So then we project managed by us during the project, but that I need more technical help on how that happens.
Yeah, starting back from the contract management, we have a project manager, we have a employees agent working on it at the project level, but then we also manage that at the program level through monthly project review meetings. So you know, the whole sort of housing delivery senior management team has an eye on every single project on a monthly basis, where we check in and see how it's performing on a financial basis, how it's performing in, you know, on a sort of program basis, and how it's performing in terms of quality. Yeah. So we've got eyes on that, you know, on a monthly basis, and at a sort of management level, and on a much more regular basis at a project management level. In terms of when will this be delivered, we are looking to get it on site in the 21-26 programme. That's why we're rushing at this. So this, you know, we are, you know, we are aiming, you know, certainly by, you know, we're hoping to get it by March 26, so GLA start on site. Latest possible date is September 26, which is a sort of last knockings. It's a funding requirement. So that's why you'll have noticed a few more projects than normal. We are we are going for approval to tender now at this roughly the same time that we're submitting the planning applications. So for this scheme, we're expecting the planning application to go in imminently. And then, and so it should be a committee and coming to its final decision on once we've got tenders back at roughly around the same timeline, so that we can, fingers crossed, get it on site to meet the funding deadlines.
Yeah, right. Thank
you. So we will return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 25. I can move to item 11, which is the approval to tender for a works contractor to build 17 homes at Tiverton Estate. Councillor Williams.
So with a council house building programme with a target of 3,000 council homes by 2031. And I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but it needs to be repeated as often as possible. It's a hugely ambitious target, and we're on track and actually in front of that target currently, which I think is a massive testament to the team and to the residents who have engaged so positively in all of the engagement that we carry out. And in fact, on this one, the 17 homes and the Tiverton Estate has actually changed quite significantly during engagement process, and what the residents wanted and what they wanted on the wider estate, and the wayfinding within the estate and pathways across the green area. So it really does show that proper engagement does lead to something that is going to be more suitable for the people who live there currently, and who will also, of course, with the Neighbourhood Move scheme, be some of the people who live there in the future. So as with all our builds, this is a really friendly scheme, designed using passive house insulation principles, powered by heat pumps and solar panels, and designed also, because of where it's located, to minimise noise from the roads and railway. So I'm just very, very delighted to be able to hopefully get this tender approved this evening, so we can get on with building some more homes. Thank you.
Questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Catter.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I have to sort of echo what you've said about the engagement with residents. I've spoken to a lot of them on the estate there were a number of opportunities for residents to get involved and look at the plans and discuss them with the team. So I appreciate that. I have to put my hands up and say that when the proposals for the Remington Road development were put forward, I had my misgivings, and I was quite concerned that this, on quite a residentially dense area of our borough, it was going to be even denser. And I have to say that that development has actually been able to change my mind completely. It's been the whole process that it went through was a really positive one, and the number of people that have moved into those flats from overcrowded housing on the estate has transformed their lives through the Neighbourhood Move scheme, and it is an exceptionally high quality development. Looks great, really sort of, you don't feel like that it's hard to remember what was there before, and the public realm aspects are really an improvement on what was previously there. So that's all really great, but just to remember that my misgivings came from the density and that increased density. And this block is obviously going to be going into again of quite probably the densest part of the Tiverton estate. So I think looking at those designs has been really well approached in terms of how the public realm aspects of it. I know, and I'm basically sort of just sharing the concerns that residents in that area have, especially on Remington Road, that they are going to be, that what little and quite substandard green space is in that area is going to go altogether, and they need reassurance that what's going to come in its place will be like Remington, where that public square that is there now is a massively great improvement, especially over the summer. It's been wonderful to see families and children hanging out there, that there's reassurance from you that that public space will be something that enormous amounts of thought and effort go into. The family homes, the quality of our homes is not to be questioned. So it's really about how people who are living there now are going to feel once that development is complete. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't think that there wasn't actually a question, was there? Oh, was there?
It was a reassurance just on the public realm.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, it was a long. I know it was a long journey to get there, but I just.
I mean, yes, and that is so important on the Tiverton estate to try and get that placemaking right. And I think that's why I would say again that the second iteration, or the second main iteration of the design there, did really respond to how residents felt about the space, and also keeping the old trees mature. I think is the word we use, mature trees, etc. So that's, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the Councillor Carlin?
Sorry, it's not actually a question, but I just wanted to say in the RIBA award-winning development on Remington, which is so beautiful and has won a lot of awards. Thank you.
Would you like to name the architect? Then we can send him a recording. No, they are, and lots of our schemes are award-winning, and we're up for some more quite soon, I think, from Inside Housing. So you'll have to all wish us luck at that ceremony.
Just a gentle reminder to Cabinet colleagues to try and stick to questions, because I'm going to say the same to Councillor Corley Harrison when he makes comments as well. So if we can stick to questions and we celebrate when we need to as well. Councillor Corley Harrison, who's going to stick to questions, I think.
After I waffle on. All right. Question. Let me just scroll down to the question bit. Okay, right. So my recollection is we already have residents in council buildings that are passive house. So I'm just wondering what sort of surveys, resident feedback has taken place, snagging, to learn from what we've done already to apply to this and future developments, particularly in respect to the passive house elements of it. And what sort of local benefits are being added and sort of promoted to residents to kind of mitigate against the local concerns, like the loss of green space, there's a worry, and to get everyone on board with the proposals. And then this may be more for Robbie as well, what sort of review work does the house building or the finance team do after project completions on developments like these, and after all the snagging and all the related works, to kind of analyse the total project spend against the original estimate, validate accuracy of proposals, cost savings against TA, all of these sorts of elements? How does that all come together, and how long does that go on for? Thanks.
That's quite a long book would be needed for the answer to that question. So I'll start with what I can and then hand over. So resident feedback is collected at later stages. I'll probably will tell you exactly when, but I would just say from my personal experience, we go along and meet residents, and one which isn't quite passive house, is it, on White Hart Lane? No, but it's very high eco standards and with mechanical ventilation. And Dad there was telling me both his daughters, who have stopped having to have any asthma medication since they moved into that house. So just words like that were better than any survey to me, even though we do the surveys. But I think living in those sort of homes, I think it's quite difficult for new residents, because I wouldn't know how to run those homes. You have to keep the thing on all the time, even if, not like they're on for 2 hours in the morning and on for 2 hours in the afternoon. So that's why we have quite an intensive aftercare team who are separate to the standard housing management to just give that little bit more wraparound that's required. But I'm sure Robbie can talk a bit more about that. Getting everyone on board with development is always difficult, as you know, we shared quite a long time on planning committee. I think people are generally more worried about car parking spaces than green spaces. But I think definitely for the car parking spaces, what we can do to alleviate fears is to, you know, do proper parking stress surveys, find out what load other areas can take, whether, you know, all of that sort of thing. So we have the data to say, yes, you will not, you know, lose as much as you think, etc. And on the green spaces, what we have to do is always, well, it's a legal requirement to have a net gain of biodiversity, but actually we would do that anyway, because quite often just a piece of grass is not actually bringing much at all to the biodiversity party. So if you actually get some better high quality stuff going on through, depends on the site, but various different measures, you do actually bring some net biodiversity, net gain quite easily, and actually, like at Remington Road, provide a more usable, useful space which has gardens, trees, seating. Whereas what was there before was some grass that was only ever used to let dogs go and do their business on. So it's created a whole new feel. It's really nice, yeah.
I might just I think learnings from generally our heating and ventilation systems, whether we go for passive house certification or not, I think there's really two key learnings that we've learned from aftercare. The first is, you know, when we sign residents up, you know, apart from messages around paying your rent, the other really key message is never turn your MVHR off. And that's repeated constantly throughout the sign up process, and clean your filter once every 3 months, because those are the two things that can affect, you know, the working of that ventilation system, which means that because they're so airtight, which is really good because it keeps people's heating bills low, if that MVHR isn't on, you're running the risk of damp and mold, because there's that air, you know, the air can't purge. So that's pretty much the key message that we do in terms of passive house, and we drum that message in, you know, on the sign ups, on the settling in visits. We ask people if they clean their filters, so that's all part of how we manage, I guess. Rather, you know, I think there's also a bit of learning in terms of what you know, we've evolved in terms of our technical specifications on what type of MVHRs we use. We've evolved that. We've also looked, you know, we're also constantly looking, you know, air source heat pumps are a constantly evolving market. So we are, you know, constantly looking at what the new and best products are to use there. In terms of our review, so we have a gateway process for development. So the first 3 gateways are all about getting the, you know, so we're at the cusp of gateway 3, which is where we agree to go on site and build it. Gateway 4 is essentially where we reach practical completion, and that's just like reviewing where we believe, where post completion we're at with our finances. And then the last gateway, which I think is probably the most important in some ways, is gateway 5, where we review, you know, this is generally after the scheme has ended the defects liability period. So it's at that point we'll know how many defects we had, how much it costs to fix it, whether we've managed to stay in budget for all of those things. We've not yet had an issue with defects. But also we do our post-occupancy surveys at that point as well. And so you'll notice when we do our sort of regular housing delivery programme updates, what we'll tend to do is we'll put those Gateway 5 reports, or at least a summary of those Gateway 5 reports, in those cabinet reports. So, you know, so those do come to cabinet as well. And so you'll be able to see from that, you know, we have been achieving, you know, really fantastic resident satisfaction with the homes that we've been delivering, but also, you know, we publish it warts and all, and you can see there are lessons that come out of these, and they inform future design and future decisions and approaches.
Thank you. So we will return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 26. Item 12, admission to schools, and this is the proposed admission arrangements for 27-28. Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you. This is the annual report, statutory report, which we're required to bring regarding admission arrangements for every academic year, and this is for academic year 27-28, and it's asking for Cabinet for permission to go to consultation on new admissions arrangements. Just to set the scene slightly, colleagues will know that numbers are falling across London, and that means the local authority has to review the admissions arrangements and admissions numbers across the school estate. We, in this report, we are proposing that there are some planned admission number reductions at secondary level at 3 of our secondary schools to adjust the numbers with the increased class size, where we're following now national guidelines, and class sizes will be 30 as opposed to 27, which has been agreed with the trade unions, and remedies or brings things into alignment with the rest of the country. So there's been minor adjustments at Parkview, Gladesmore and Highgate Wood, and it's also, we're asking for a reduction in planned admission number to Rokesley Juniors. I'd like to say, following the 2 housing reports, how important it is to have family housing in this borough. We really want our families to have decent housing, so those reports really set a wonderful tone, and we obviously need as many children in our schools as we possibly can, given the declining numbers. So, you know, children's and housing are working obviously together on this, and I'll just commend the report. The request is to go to consultation, not to make the decision. There's a statutory consultation. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Any questions from the Cabinet to Councillor Brabazon? No, Councillor Gully-Harrison.
Thanks, Zena. So I'm just wondering whether you've had recently sort of any medium or long-term modelling on the trajectory of sort of predicted intake, like by London councils or whatever, so we know what we are working for in the next decade and what our schools should look like. We don't want to close schools if we need to reopen, you know, that sort of thing. And then just with the PAN reductions, do we as yet have an idea of what that might mean in terms of redundancies and what that might look like, if any, within the schools? And where schools are reducing their intake sizes, is anything being done to work with schools to potentially help them to commercialize now underutilized spaces? Because, you know, they're education providers, they might not have the skills to do that, but there will be spaces that open up through our declining numbers that maybe we can offer support, and then that can obviously help fund them, ideally.
I'm going to start with the last question first, and I may give you Miles, as I'm sure the officers, Anne and Jane is on the call as well, would want to respond in more detail. Regarding the school estate, we've been working with our schools for a while now through Safety Valve, the special needs programme, in order to reconfigure premises to meet the needs of children with special needs. While numbers are going down, special needs have gone up. So, and we have a really rigorous and I think very good programme. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? But a good programme for delivering for inclusive education for children on mainstream sites, so they have access to the mainstream curriculum, but also a base where they need specialist provision. And I was just saying to Anne, I visited the Brook, which I commend you to visit, on Friday to see the new building, which was just amazing. I'm so proud of it, where we've taken 18 children on the autistic spectrum who would otherwise go out of borough without a shadow of a doubt because of the level of their needs. Where the caretaker's house at Alexandra Primary should be finished the end of this term for children with social emotional. Earlsmead we've opened. We've got provision coming along for secondary social, emotional, mental health, which is a huge need. So in summary, we are doing that and looking at all the estate with a view to accommodating children with special educational needs on site, which is in line with all national policy. But most importantly, we hold on to the school estate because birth rates may at some point go up. So that goes to your second long-term modelling. I think the GLA are modelling child yield all the time on developments. There is no indication either from the GLA or London councils that birth rates are going to go up anytime soon. I think that's so it's really important to hold on to the schools while we're doing that. And that, you know, the fact that we're building our family housing is we're doing our bit to try and keep the numbers. On the pound reductions in the schools, I've forgotten the question now. I wrote pound reductions. Oh, about redundancies and so on. I know Jane has been working directly with schools, and I think it'd be appropriate for Jane to answer in detail if that's all right with you, Anne.
Absolutely. Yeah, good evening, everybody. Jane Edwards, Director of Schools and Learning. So in terms of the forecast, I will add as well that we have a school place planning report, which has been completed for 2025, which looks at the forecast for our own boroughs, and that document is available online. In terms of the redundancies, we have already been working proactively with some of our schools to support their restructures. We try to make sure that we redeploy staff wherever we can, but there have been a significant number of restructures to align school staffing to the reduced pupil numbers. And so the council supports the schools in doing that, either through schools HR, through schools finance, or through conversations with myself about the appropriateness of the proposals they bring forward. But ultimately, it's a governing body responsibility to decide what their staffing structure is and the suitability of that. But we have seen a number of restructures that link to falling roles.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is 3.1 of the report, which is on page 211. Are we all in agreement? Great, thank you. Item 13, which is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Public Report. Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, as a council, we recognise the seriousness of the findings in this report. We fully accept that mistakes were made and apologise unreservedly for those errors. It is well below my expectations for the service we provide to residents, and I offer my full apology. Historic practices have changed fundamentally since the events that gave rise to this case. We no longer have a backlog of unread emails, and safeguarding concerns are triaged in a timely manner. Relevant staff have received training and complaint handling is being improved. I believe the council is focused on the right things as set out in this report and also in our adult social care improvement plan, which follows next. While residual risks can never be entirely removed, we're determined to improve how we deliver for our residents and those who care for them, and I commend this report to you.
Thank you, Councillor Tasneves. Questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Williams.
Just say I'm pleased to see that we have apologised and acknowledged that mistakes were made, but it would be really good to get a better understanding about what we then did once the issues were uncovered, as outlined in the report.
Thank you for your question. So in early 2024, senior management became aware of a backlog of emails and police reports that had accumulated between 2019 and 2023. a dedicated resource was established to address the backlog and to review cases and appropriately manage them. As soon as the unread emails were identified, immediate action was taken. The Chief Executive, me as the Cabinet member and the leader were informed at the time and followed that appropriate action that was being taken.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Catter.
Yeah, I guess following on from that, can you say a little bit more about what's been put in place? So looking forward in terms of actions in response to the report. Thanks.
Thanks very much for the question. We now have a whole new management team in place. We've made substantial improvements to how we work. There are clearer lines of accountability, stronger oversight, and internal structures have been strengthened, especially around that receipt of incoming queries and emails. Clear timelines are in place. So our aim is that all safeguarding referrals are triaged within 48 hours of them arriving with us. We've also commissioned an external review to give us some independent assurance that we're being effective and that we're doing the right things, strengthen what we do at the moment, but also think about what else others might be doing elsewhere that we can learn from. We also have some ongoing audits, data monitoring and staff training to continue to evidence the change and continue the learning and continue our improvement to staff responsiveness.
Thank you. Any more questions from the Cabinet on this report? Okay, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
So I think it's probably without doubt one of the most serious cases I witnessed during my time as a councillor. So, you know, I hope the significance of that, you know, and the severity of what has been discovered goes beyond, well, what has been discovered beyond the LGO report is realised by all senior officers and yourself as, you know, senior members of the council. I'd also like to say thanks to Andy and Sarah and Joe for meeting with me and Councillor Connor to discuss it. But on the matter of the report here this evening, you know, the council confirmed that there was over 1,000 unread emails in the inbox, over 500 police reports. I understand this has been going on since 2019, so that's 5 years. So do you have a sense of how many safeguarding reports were potentially overlooked and actually how many LGO complaints might have been as a result of this issue, whether past or maybe coming through? The council said, you know, that the safeguarding team no longer has a backlog of unread emails, that safeguarding concerns are triaged, I think, within 48 hours. So, but how can we be assured that kind of the triaging leads to action? That if something is triaged as, you know, whatever the process is, ABC, 1, 2, 3, red, amber, green, you know, that all of those ambers, let's say, are being acted upon within a timely manner. What is that time frame? Can we be clear on that? Because it's one thing to triage, it's another thing to act on it. And I'd like to understand why you felt, as someone within a small group that knew about this, to keep it secret from the public, to keep it secret from your fellow councillors, keep it secret from the scrutiny panel. You know, it's come out eventually. So, you know, in whose interest was that? Because it doesn't necessarily lead to a transparent council. Thanks.
Thanks very much for your questions. The first thing I'd like to address is your observation about it being one of the most serious issues that you've come across. I think I've been really clear. It's totally unacceptable. And I agree with you, it is really serious. And frankly, it's not good enough. And I think I've been really clear with the team about that too. I totally agree that it's not what a good service looks like. It's nowhere near. So I just think it's really important for me to acknowledge that and hear what you've said too and reflect that back. And that's why I've apologised unreservedly. I think there's no point. We're not hiding from it. I don't think I'm keeping it secret. I think what we've worked really hard to do is address the issue, change processes. I think I've highlighted there's a change of management. There's clear lines of accountability. There are no unread emails. I think you had some technical questions there, which I might defer to the team about how we work in practice and, well, say technical, operational, which I might ask Sarah to come in on. But most of all, I think the really important thing is that I lean into us commissioning an independent external review who can say, and I think look at some of the issues on an operational level that you're highlighting, but also look at some of the issues more broadly and say, what are they doing that's right? What more can we do? And where can we learn from best practice? I think that's really important. I'm not swerving it. We're owning it as a service. And I think all the work we've done, the next paper that follows is about the improvement plan. And I don't think we've swerved anything there. We've set out something that's realistic because we know there's a lot of work to do. And we're owning and taking responsibility. And I'm owning that as a cabinet member and saying we're going forward together with all our residents to make change and make things better. But just to emphasise again, I'm not taking it for granted. I'm not saying that this is okay, quite the opposite. And I think everyone's really clear that things need to change. But I think we've set out a plan to do that. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to come in on any of the operational issues.
Will do. Sarah Sutton, Corporate Director for Adults, Housing and Health. I think there were some questions in relation to, I suppose, some of the processes now and the timeliness of it. So we aim to triage within sort of 48 hours or two working days. And each case will be different. So we will triage based on the level of risk where there is a need for the team. And this is particularly in relation to safeguarding cases, which I think it's probably really important to draw the distinction on, because those will be cases where there is a high level of risk and we need to put protective measures in place to safeguard and support the vulnerable resident who might be in receipt of care and support. So protective measures will be put in place, but we recognise actually in a lot of cases it will take much longer than a short period of time to resolve some of the issues. So the really important thing is making sure that protective measures are put in place whilst further investigations continue. And that is specifically in relation to safeguarding. The team do also receive a number of emails that need referring on to either parts of adult social care or sometimes other departments. So if there is a request, for example, for a Care Act assessment, that will then be allocated to one of our locality teams to manage. But the really important thing is that we do work on the basis of risk. It's also worth noting that the police reports were called Merlins. They're now called radars, and they already come forward to us with a level of risk to them, and they will be sort of a red, amber, green rating, and all of the red high risk or higher risk cases will be dealt with directly by the safeguarding team due to the very nature of them, and that will follow that same process by way of 48 hours. But we've got a really robust process where we monitor those police reports, and we don't have, and bar any that have come in today, we don't have any outstanding at the moment. We've got a much improved process for police reports as well.
So are you going to, sorry, my third question was why you didn't share it.
Sorry, say that again.
Well, this has been known about by yourselves for over a year. So why was it kept, behind closed doors rather than made public? We accept this, we're learning from it, here's the process in place.
I think we've been really clear that we got on the job, with the job of tackling the issue itself and making sure that we were doing the job that needed to be done. I think I've been clear in saying that we now have a new management in place, a new structure in place, and a new way of working. And I think that's what we have focused on in the time that we've had to address the matter.
Thank you. And I just wanted to support what Councillor Dasneves has said. There's been, we've got on with the role and we've got on with the job. And I think the next item will outline some of how we intend to tackle the issues that have been uncovered. Okay, if I can move to the resolution, which is set out in 3.1 to 3.4 of the report. This is on page 324 of the agenda. Do we all agree? Great, thank you. Item 14, which is the Adult Social Care Improvement Plan. Councillor Dasneves.
Thanks, Chair, colleagues. As we've already said and highlighted, we know that action's needed in adult social care, and this 3-year plan is the next step on our journey to transforming our services for our most vulnerable residents. The challenges we face aren't straightforward. We are tackling a budget shortfall, as Councillor Carlin mentioned earlier, and an ageing population and ever-growing demand for our key services. The Adult Social Care Improvement Plan sets out a practical set of actions that we'll take, working alongside residents, families, carers and staff to deliver services in a way that best supports them to live independently and in a fulfilling way. And so I recommend the report before you and the plan itself.
Thank you. Questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you, Councillor Dasneves, for coming forward with this really detailed plan. I wanted to ask my questions about in relation to paragraph 7.1, which is the year 1 objectives of the improvement plan. And I wonder whether you could tell us, I mean, I feel like that's quite detailed, what you've laid out there, and there's 10 different priorities. And I'm just wondering whether you can, in a sort of nutshell, give us an idea of how residents, what differences they will see in year 1.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. Yeah, you're right. There are 10 key priority areas there. I suppose I might answer in a slightly different way and pull out some of the things that I think when I spend time in the borough with residents, the things that they sort of talk to me about that I might highlight. And one of those is waiting times for assessments and reviews. I think we've probably all seen that in our inboxes. We all know that's a source of frustration. So I think that's a key area that we need to begin to see progress on in year 1. I think also looking at complaint handling, given the item we just had, and talking about how complaints, I think it's Councillor Chandmani always talks about complaints as being a way of having that free learning space and that opportunity. And I think we need to move a bit upstream and do that learning earlier on in the process. So I think that's a key area that we'll be focusing on in year 1. I think we need to do some work with our staff. I think that's fair to say, in developing them, investing in them, but therefore making them better able to deliver for residents. So we've got a plan for a workforce development strategy. I think that's quite important. I think that'll also contribute to us then attracting and retaining the right staff. And probably the last thing I'd focus on is the carer strategy, which is the next item. I think that's a really important piece of work that we've already been working on for some time. And I think it gives us the opportunity to work closely with residents and to work closely with a set of residents who are really vulnerable at times, but also really undervalued and not always given the respect that they ought to be by society as a whole and services individually. So I think those are things I'd highlight and say are, and hopefully lots of colleagues recognise those as being things that they see within their casework and within the conversations they have with residents.
Councillor Arkell.
Thank you. I've just got a very quick question. Just in terms of kind of restoring confidence and providing reassurance to residents, could you just give a bit more detail about how this will be monitored and reported against as well, please?
Thanks very much for that question. So I think the really important thing to say is that the implementation of the improvement plan will be overseen by the cross-party Adults Improvement Board. I think that's really important to acknowledge that, and that will be chaired by the Chief Executive. It's really important to know and for that to be acknowledged. I think we'll also be drawing on external expertise. We have some expertise offered to us through CQC by an organisation called Partners in Care. We have other organisations. There's an organisation called 3110, and these are organisations who are working in other parts of the country and who can bring learning and also give us a bit of oversight and a bit of an opportunity to benchmark with some of the things that we're doing, that other people are doing elsewhere, and learn. So I think those two things. And of course, we do still have the role of scrutiny, and we'll be taking the improvement plan to scrutiny. And we've had some good conversations at the improvement board, but also at scrutiny about the need for key performance indicators beyond the national. We have those national measures, which some of which are quite broad, but also some of the more local measures that can allow us to monitor our activity month on month, year on year.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? But you're putting your hand up, Councillor Williams, you're scratching your head. Right, okay. Councillor Cooley-Harrison.
Thanks. So obviously adults has been sort of one area that the council's struggled with in terms of meeting its budget saving, or the budget savings applied to that particular department. And there's also been substantial additional investment going in. But obviously from the CQC report, more work's needed. So just wondering how that's going to balance out between, you know, these savings are being put forward. We need additional work. We're already putting additional funding in for other areas. You know, it's another thing. You know, there's only so much, I suppose. You also mentioned there about the improvement board. Obviously, the report states that that's going to be overseen by the improvement board. I'm aware that it's struggled to find its rhythm so far. I think that improvement board, it's still kind of finding exactly how to operate. So what kind of changes are you looking to bring in to make sure that that's a really functional board, that it's going to be successfully overseeing this plan and other improvements within the adult space? And then you also just mentioned key performance indicators and target of that. And I think Councillor Corr's already raised this, but you know, you've got whatever it is, 18, 20 pages within this pack of KPIs, none of which actually has a single metric applied to it. So I actually don't know how this Cabinet can approve the report, because it's a report that's to be approved against a series of KPIs which are not listed. You know, it's just percentage what? Are we looking at 70% or 1%? You know, and like I said, there's probably about 50 or so of those. So, you know, my recommendation would be that the paper goes back and then comes back to Cabinet again once those KPIs are in place. But if that's not going to happen, I'd like some reassurance about how those KPIs are going to be arrived at and when they'll be published, and will that be in the public domain, either coming back to Cabinet or some other format? Thanks.
Thanks for the question. I think I'll work backwards, actually, just seems to come naturally. I think we recognise that we do need KPIs, but I think it's also really important to note that the plan that's before you sets out the things that both CQC and we ourselves have reflected on that need improving. So I think it has that validity. It is about a summary of the things that we need to work towards improving. And undoubtedly, I hope that all councillors will recognise in there the themes and things that residents have raised, and that residents feel need improving, but also that have been highlighted through CQC. In terms of how those metrics would be arrived, I think I'm right in saying that at the last improvement board, we agreed that at the following meeting, we'd discuss metrics and talk about what they should look like. It's a little more complex than one might think, because we have ASCOF national data, some of which is very broad in what it measures, as you're probably aware. And then we have our own, we might have our own sort of vision about how we measure some of the more, as I said, and set out how we might measure progress and change over months and a year or 2 years. So my reassurance to you is that the board will be involved in setting those metrics and helping us arrive at that. I think we've already made that commitment. In terms of the rhythm, the board finding its rhythm, I think that's a fair observation. Any group of people coming together only in a few times to talk about some really big issues and also trying to find their focus point. I think it will take time, but I think what I'm really confident in is that the board's giving the opportunity for everyone who's in the room to suggest what we do next together and how we do that. So I think it's led by the people, and I tend to try and sit on my hands and not say too much and allow the board, I'm there to listen, and allow the board to do its work under the auspices of the chief exec. So back to you, the final question I think was about budget, is that right? You're right, we have some really significant financial challenges, and I think I've spoken in this room many times about that. I think they have both the potential to impact the delivery, you're right, but they also are part of the driver for change, because if we are more efficient and more effective, we could be ambitious and say that will give us a bit more space, maybe not lots, but a little more space to be a bit more early intervention, prevention in our activity. But as long as we're always struggling and in crisis, it will be hard to focus that. And you'll be aware that we're developing an approach to early intervention. So I think that will help us. That should help us undoubtedly. On your question of having had lots of impact, I think that's right. We have had lots of financial input. Acknowledge that. But for the most part, you'll be aware that that's passported out of the organisation. It seeks to meet the rising costs of care and also the rising numbers. Again, I think the more we're able to do at neighbourhood level with health, which is our medium-term ambition, with health can help us perhaps with prevention and early intervention for people who are not yet in that care, not receiving care, if that makes sense. But undoubtedly, I'm fairly outspoken in my cabinet role around why I feel that we need to see national and regional reform in health and social care, and that would really help us. I welcome the government's shifts, but I am frustrated, like many, that we're not moving fast enough because our residents really need it. So I hear you. So I think it's difficult for me to sit here and say, you're right, we have had lots of input financially, but actually that money hasn't really touched the sides, because it's just been dealing with what is a system in crisis, a health system in crisis, a social care system in crisis, and all the rest in between, and then those things bouncing off. But I still feel that by being more effective and more efficient, we are likely to be able to at least see some ability to then get on with the other task that we wouldn't otherwise. That's my hope.
Okay, if we can move to the resolution as set out in 3.1 to 3.6 of the report, and this is page 346 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Okay, item 15, which is the publication of the adult carers strategy. Councillor Dasnevs.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone's going to get tired of the sound of my voice. This before you is our carers strategy, which I think, as I've highlighted, is a key part or aspect of our improvement journey. And I'm really pleased to bring it here to you as that. It has been co-produced with residents across the borough and reflects the things that they told us were important to them. And in fact, co-produced with carers across the borough, I should say, and reflects their priorities. It's part of a I would say, passionate commitment for me and the team in recognising a group of people who are often undervalued and yet play such a vital role, and will continue to do so. Let's be honest, as especially as we see an ageing population and increase in demand. And anyone who's had caring responsibility or knows someone who has knows how relentless that job can be, which is why this strategy is so important and so exciting, as an opportunity to think differently, and to support people differently and to work alongside them. And therefore, I recommend it to you all.
Thank you again, Councillor Dasnev. Councillor Ovett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dasnev. I'm really glad to see the strategy come together. You've mentioned co-production work with carers. Can you provide more details on how this co-production was carried out with carers?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Actually, this journey of the carer strategy started back in 2023, 2024 with a survey, but we all know that a survey is just the tip of the iceberg of the kinds of engagement we should do and that we can do. So since then, we've held workshops, and I've certainly attended some of them in person and online to reach different carers. And really importantly, beyond those workshops, which have looked at the different themes and said, does this look right, that came out of our survey, but also, questioned and queried those themes. We've also reached out to particular community groups who we know don't always feel heard by us and by other organisations in the borough and beyond. And we've worked through those specific community organisations and their representatives to talk to them about what a carer strategy for them could look like. So I like to think that we might not have reached everyone, but we've certainly got a good mix of different voices into that space.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Carlin.
It's a great plan, but how are you going to monitor the implementation of the strategy?
Thanks for the question, and it speaks a little bit to some of the points that Luke was addressing earlier. I think the key for any work with our carers is going to be our joint partnership board. And specifically, there's a carers reference group within that. But of course, there are a range of reference groups representing the different needs that use adult social care in Haringey. And they'll be following that journey. And anyone who knows those individuals and knows them as a group knows that they're fairly robust and challenging. But also, I think in the renewal of that group, we've got a moment where we can work together better. So they'll be following the journey of the strategy. Of course, the strategy also comes to Health and Wellbeing Board, and that way gives it an opportunity to connect with the wider health system, which I think is really important. As I said, neighbourhoods and neighbourhood health being a key theme for us in Haringey and elsewhere in London. So I think that'll also be a space in which we can have conversations with other partners. I don't know if Joe or Sujis have got anything to add on that, or if I covered everything.
Yeah, I would just thank you, Councillor. Jo Beatty, Director of Adult Social Care for Haringey. Yeah, I would just add that I think it's really important that we grow governance with carers. So we have a group of carers that very much engage with the service and with some of the services around the table here as well. But we're keen to use all of our networks and events that we have for carers to try and entice, encourage and inspire people to get involved in whatever which way suits them, because obviously the demands on their time are excessive. So it's not always possible for people to come to meetings, but they can make a contribution to how we monitor the implementation of the strategy. Yeah.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? No. Councillor Colley-Harrison.
Thanks. So I think in the report, it states that Haringey wants to put care at the heart of what it does, quite rightly. So I'm just wondering what steps Haringey is taking to make itself a carer-friendly employer. For example, do we currently offer paid carers leave to employees or third-party service providers and that sort of thing? Also, given the kind of the CQC report around this particular space, how can kind of carers and all residents really be sort of assured that progress is going to be made, that aspirations turn into actions, you know, that there's kind of no additional funding going into it. So, you know, I think they probably want to, yeah, just get that reassurance from you as the kind of the lead on it. And obviously care relies quite heavily on unpaid carers, third party sector, you know, charities, voluntary sector, that sort of thing. So just wondering if any of the current budget will be going to support those providers for the services that they are offering, for the work they're doing, and whether you have any mitigations in case, you know, they can't continue to support it. It's really difficult for everyone at the moment financially. So if you then have to fill that space that they're currently filling. Thanks.
Thanks for those questions. If I can, I'd ask that we come back to you with a written response on carer-friendly employer, etc., if that's all right, because I think there's probably quite a lot that we do, but it's not my specialism, to be honest. But I know that it's definitely a commitment that we've made to staff to be supportive. I think it's a fair question to say, how can we be assured that the aspirations will be met? I think the amount of effort and the detail that's gone into the strategy so far has given certainly some of the carers I've spoken to confidence that we are committed. And there isn't another option. This is the way forward. But you are right, we are challenged financially. No one's pretending that. So I think it's about being smart about what we do. We do fund carers groups, so you'll be aware of the Carers Coffee Morning. And there's a few other groups actually, and we do provide small amounts of funding. We see that as being a really good use of funds, and actually more of that. So I think enabling our voluntary sector, and those are part of the conversations. And I might move to Jo, because I know she's had, well, Sarah wants to come in around some of the recent conversations. I'd also lean into, just today I've had an email from a GP who's involved in the neighbourhoods work. He wants to talk to me about some of the work that we're doing to support, like work with walking groups, work in our community, and how that can help people's health and well-being. I think that's really important. That was one of the big aspirations for carers: feeling well, having space, having the right kind of respite. So I think again, to use this expression again, there's only one game in town, and that's thinking together, because there isn't space and scope to keep sitting in our silos. We have to work together. That's about mobilising everything. Some of the groups are run by volunteers. We fund and support that where we can. Voluntary sector do work. Health need to step up. It's all of us together. That makes it harder, but should make outcomes better. And it's a journey. It's not an end. It's not you start and then it ends. It's everyday learning, everyday tweaking, everyday doing new, but also replicating what works. Jo, I don't know if no, Sarah, you wanted to come in.
Thanks. I was just going to come in on the point regarding funding, and I suppose in recognition of the support that carers and unpaid carers provide to the wider health system as well as social care, and that being really fundamental. And it was one of the areas of feedback actually that we'll take forward through the strategy and plan about that better integration, which may lean into the neighbourhood piece. But importantly, from a funding perspective, actually quite a large proportion of the support and the focus that we've got to meet the commitments within the plan will be funded through better care funding, recognition of that kind of, wider health and social care need for investment in this space. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Okay, if we can move to the resolution, which is on set out in 3.1 of the report, page 475. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. item 16, which is the approval of a draft homelessness strategy for consultation. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So a home is a fundamental human right. Few things are more important than having a home. But as we all know, housing is becoming increasingly unaffordable. Home ownership and private renting are really becoming so out of reach for so many people. We do have a council house building programme with a target of 3,000 homes by 2031. But even with that in place, we are really, a lot of people are really facing huge difficulty in finding suitable accommodation. So that we work very hard with partners across the borough to prevent and respond to homelessness. And that's really important. And how we do that is critically important. So we're proposing a homelessness strategy that has effective partnership working at its heart. So the strategy aims to protect Haringey's wider population from the risk of homelessness, to improve our homelessness prevention services, to provide specific interventions for groups at particular risk of homelessness, and to improve accommodation options for those experiencing the emergency that is homelessness. But the actions proposed in this draft strategy cannot on their own end the homelessness crisis. Addressing that needs more structural solutions, including a reformed welfare system and a better security of tenure, though I have to, of course, commend the government on getting royal assent for the Renters' Rights Bill, which will be transformative to many of our residents. So the people of Haringey are our biggest strength, and I want to thank all the organisations who have worked as part of the Haringey Homelessness Reduction Board, which I chair, to oversee this draft strategy development, and the very, very many people with lived experience of homelessness who've helped us understand the issues it has needed to address. I encourage us to approve this draft strategy so that we can go out and consult everyone in Haringey on its contents. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the Cabinet? No. Okay. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Just wondering if the council is still continuing to explore the use of kind of alternative types of housing, for example, the prefab off-site development housing on a temporary site allocations or plots for short-term. You know what I'm talking about. Obviously, we've been through it. Also, just wondering whether the council has any ideas of a kind of the top drivers of homelessness as it stands, and whether we've seen a shift or are seeing a shift. And again, from a preventative measure, if we're seeing a shift towards a particular reason or cause for that. Whether we can kind of get in early with other services. And then you mentioned the kind of the Renters' Rights Act, which is beneficial for tenants, certainly, but also there is the suggestion within that space that there is going to be more sales of properties as landlords don't want to adopt the Act, I suppose. Are you exploring that as an opportunity, for example, from an acquisitions perspective, or for example, for the PSL proposals which are coming to budget, which we put forward as an amendment last year that you rejected and now is coming forward? Wouldn't be an acquisition, but putting that incentive proposal to them and saying, look, actually, we can take this off your hands for the next 5 years, and here's your incentive, just to time that with when the Act comes in and there is potentially some additional properties on the market.
Thank you. So yes, in answer to your first question, and I think the term you were looking for was meanwhile use. So we have a few sites that are cross-rail safeguarded, for example, things like that. So yes, you look at modular, and in fact, I've been having some email exchanges about particular modular build today, because I don't know if you've seen the new special educational needs annex at Broadwood Farm School, the Brook. it's brilliant. If you look at it, it matches the school design totally. You wouldn't know it was off-site prefab, and apparently it was really great fun watching it coming on the truck as well. But unfortunately I didn't experience that. So yes, we're looking into modular builds, and we're looking into providing more lodges type of accommodation in borough, very much so. On the acquisition of properties, we have a big stretch target of acquiring for 250 a year. That's part of our plans already. Really cracking on with that. Just doing the conveyancing on that amount of stuff is quite difficult though. You know, it's quite a lot of work has to go into all that and all of the checks and what have you. Top drivers of homelessness. I think those who are working in housing demand would say, and Maddie or Jihad might want to come in. Family breakdown is a top. Domestic violence is a big driver. Those that are coming out of prison, perhaps, is a big driver. And also we have seen landlords getting out of the market, so they're or either getting out of the market or reletting at much higher rents, which is putting affordability out of reach of a lot of tenants. Now, do we think that in Haringey the Renters' Rights Bill will produce that sort of rush to sell? I think what the team seem to feel and have for a while is that happened already to a great extent. So we saw that happen. We don't know for sure, but we think that might have plateaued. Yeah, you know, you alluded to the paperwork about private sector lets. Yeah, does anybody want to come in? I think I didn't answer the top drivers of homelessness question very well.
Yes. Yeah, so I think the kind of the main driver of homelessness in the borough at the moment is the end of AST. So it kind of is what you were setting out as the issue. We have seen the impact of the Renters' Rights Act, and landlords have been preparing for that in exiting the market for some time. So I don't think that we're likely to see another spike or a sustained spike, as in we've seen that increase, that gradual increase over the last 2 years. So that's certainly been something that we've been seeing. And then I think the only other element was whether we're seeing the end of ASTs as an opportunity, so for acquisitions and for the PSL incentive scheme. So absolutely yes, we're looking at all opportunities in partnership with Robbie's team, the housing delivery team, to acquire properties to kind of add to the social housing stock that will then be let at that social housing rent. So absolutely.
Thank you. So if we can move to the resolutions, which are set out in 3.1 to 3.2 of the report. This is on page 548. Are we all in agreement? Excellent. Okay, item 17, fire doors contracts. Back to you again, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So the safety of our residents is absolutely paramount when it comes to providing safe, sustainable, stable and affordable homes for Haringey residents. One of the key findings from the Grenfell tragedy was that fire doors must be fit for purpose and maintained to ensure that they operate correctly and provide protection to the communal areas in the event of a fire. The implementation of this new contract for fire doors to flats, stairwells, corridors, cupboards, along with other passive fire safety works, will ensure that our residents can remain safely within their home, or if required, have a safe means of escape through communal corridors and stairwells to a place of safety outside. It also means that Haringey can ensure that high standards for fire doors are consistent across our council housing, as the new contracts will allow for provision of the same standard of door for all repair and major works contracts, even when carried out by different contractors. So I recommend that the Cabinet approve this award of the contracts, subject, obviously, to the second stage of leaseholder consultation, so that we can get on with improving safety for residents through the installation of these new certified fire doors inside our homes and communal areas.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Colley-Harrison.
Thanks. So, Councillor Williams, I'm sure you remember, but Council had to refund 140 grand for a previous fire door replacement programme. residents paid for the doors, and then 3 years later they still haven't had the doors, and the doors didn't materialise. And I don't think they ever got compensation. They certainly never got the interest that they would have earned in that period that they lost out. So, you know, can you guarantee that across the whole leasehold service, not just in relation to fire doors, but, you know, whether it's decent homes, whatever it may be, doesn't happen again ultimately? And then I think I'm right in reading the paper that the leaseholder element of the bill for this fire door work is 2.8 million. So do we know how many leaseholders that would affect, and kind of a very rough cost to each? And I think it's fair to say that kind of previous door replacement programs have been difficult. There's been a lot of challenge, particularly from leaseholders, particularly on the costs, and that those costs are significantly greater than if they were just to go to market with, you know, the door and windows company down the road. Are you able to commit to giving them, as in leaseholders, the opportunity to go to market, get the doors, source themselves, so long as they meet the exact same fire safety standards? Or if not, to basically add a kind of price cap to whatever competitive rate that they can get, so that they're not kind of locked into Haringey charging them 5 times what they would be able to secure the same door for with their own supplier?
I think on that, just fundamentally, you're asking for tenants to subsidise leaseholders, if that was the case. And so I would say no. I think tenants' rent, if you cap one cost, who's covering that cost would be the tenants' rents, right? So sort of that is my view. I think when it comes to compliance, that I have to absolutely listen to the qualified people on that. But logically, it would tell me, and probably tell anybody, that if we know consistently what is across all of our estate and all of the homes that we're responsible for, then that gives us a much better assurance that things are safe, rather than letting every single individual make their own choices. I mean, even if you get a fire rated door that is now compliant, how it's fitted, and all of that is really, we need that assurance. And a leaseholder's accommodation, you know, a lot of our properties are flatted, so it makes a massive difference. And I can't sleep at night worried about that. I'm going to let Scott come in and give you the detail on that, because I have spoken to the Leasehold Association at length on this matter, because I do know that frustration when those bills come in. But I think it's basically, we need to be a higher standard than you know, private individuals would consider. We need to have that assurance that our residents are safe in their homes. On the non-refund of doors, I think with the doors, we know that in the time frame you're talking about, I think with that particular case, we had COVID, we had Grenfell legislation on the horizon. So we had an ever-changing sort of landscape of availability. Of course, if you remember, because of the COVID pandemic, there was no supply chain. So it just went through lots of iterative steps of, you're right, not actually being delivered in the 3 years that it was so far. I would hope those residents have been refunded. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I can take that casework behind if they need some interest on that. Happy to do so. I think I've not really given a proper detailed technical explanation that I think I'd like the qualified people to come in with. But
if I may, Chair, can I just come back on that first point about, I get that you don't want the council to subsidise leaseholders. I totally
not
get
the
that.
council, it's tenants.
Tenants subsidise the HRA, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. I think the issue is also that the council's preferred Section 20 route, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't really afford them the opportunity to find their alternative supplier, because it's and I don't know the exact phrasing, but the fast track route or whatever it's called, it's not the 3-step route where they can go off and do whatever it is and all that sort of thing. I'm sure there is terminology for it. And that makes a big difference to leaseholders in being able to challenge the costs that are presented to them and finding those competitive quotes. I get what you're saying about safety. I completely agree with you. But if they are able to, we have a building control team, we have a review team, that may have to be built in. But the cost increase on the council doing this work is so significant versus them carrying out the works through.
As I said, I've met with the leaseholders, the chair of the Leaseholders Association. I've offered them time with our officers to discuss this. My paramount priority is keeping people safe, not giving leaseholders that freedom. That is my priority. And I'll be very proud to say that's my priority. And I do realise that there is sometimes people are annoyed by that, but that is part of being a leaseholder. And it is my priority that we keep everybody safe. And if that means that the fire doors have to be fitted in the way that they are, then that's what we do. Because I want that assurance. I don't want this role if I'm thinking I'm going to give people a bit of choice, but then we're not safe enough. That's, yeah, been round the houses on that one.
Gardner Rahman, Director of Housing. So effectively, this comes down to our contractual relationship with the leaseholder. So the lease determines what would be the landlord responsibility and what would be the leaseholder responsibility. So whenever we go out to procurement, we do strive to get value for money, not just for our leaseholders, but equally for our tenants as well. And in the past, where we have done large procurement exercise, we have engaged with our resident reps to get their view on board as part of the procurement process. What the Section 20 process allows is for us to go out to consult on the type of work that needs to happen, and then subsequently confirm the pricing of those works. And the process does allow leaseholders to put forward representation and for us to give due regard. So our contribution to that process would be to give due regard to the leaseholders. What we cannot allow, because the doors, front entrance doors and communal doors is effectively a landlord responsibility, is for leaseholders to install their own doors, partially because it's not just sourcing the doors itself that results in certification, it's how it's installed and who it's installed by. And as a council, we obviously take our fire safety seriously. We need to maintain and have access to those certification.
Scott Kay, Assistant Director for Repairs and Compliance. With regards to the leaseholders putting forward nominated contractors on this particular type of procurement, advised by leasehold and legal team, because we were tendering a programme of works, that opportunity isn't afforded. Whereas if we were tendering a long-term qualifying agreement, then they can put nominations forward for the contractors. However, in this case, we did receive nominations, and we contacted the contractors that have been put forward, and they didn't engage with us, so they weren't interested. So there was a bit of that anyway. In terms of the need to ensure the quality, as has been referred to in the doors and the price of doors, there's a whole range of doors on offer that purport to be fire doors, and there's different standards. We have to meet the most exacting standards, which is often the most expensive type of fire doors, because of the regulations and the way that they're tested. And manufacturers have very strict testing regimes, and the design of the fire doors requires them to be tested in different ways. That's different to being able to go to B&Q and buy what's badged as a fire door and then fit it yourself and put your own letterbox in. They have to be built and tested as a complete unit with all the hinges and the strips and seals and the ironmongery. And if any part of that fails, then it fails the test. So we have to maintain and purchase the most stringent standards. And also there are new standards that are being proposed that will come in during the life of the contract. So we have built that in, so we don't have to then halfway through the contract renegotiate prices or have additional costs involved that we couldn't. In terms of individual leaseholder costs, that will determine, we do have a list of the leaseholders, and that's how we've managed to estimate the total value of income. But again, it will be determined on which type of door set they have, the size of it, the amount of ironmongery, whether they choose one with a glazed panel or not. Those will all have an impact on the actual cost. When we do the work, each resident will get notification of what the cost of their contribution will be.
Thank you. Okay, we will return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 27. Item 18, which is the Housing Annual Compliance Assurance Statement. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got to check I've got the right one. There's quite a lot in the list today. Maintaining good quality, safe, warm and sustainable council homes is a key priority for this council. And this is our annual compliance report for 2024-25 against what are called the Big Six safety compliance areas. So that's gas, electricity, fire safety, asbestos, Legionella and lifts. And one of the key priorities of our housing improvement plan approved by Cabinet in 2023 is to improve our compliance and reporting. And we have since implemented a range of proactive safety and risk assessment programmes for all compliance activities, which are closely monitored through our governance processes. On a monthly basis, the Council's internal Building Safety and Compliance Board are presented with key performance indicator reports on the Big Six compliance areas. And we also seek out through Mazars auditors independent review and assessment of the quality of our reporting and assurance to ensure that it is accurate and robust. This provides assurance both to the public and to ourselves as elected members that the council officers are appropriately managing property-related health and safety risks. The Mazars audit reported a high level of accuracy whilst setting out a number of recommendations which the service are progressing as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Quilly-Harrison.
Thanks. As I sit on the Housing Improvement Board, a lot of questions go there. So there's less to dig into, I suppose, because Jarhead's had his ear bitten off already, really. Also, I should just say that board does function really well, and I do appreciate the work of, you know, Andy chairing it, Sarah, all our board members are very, very engaged, very good. Jarhead, Scott, everyone that's involved. I think it's made some real progress, particularly on compliance. So much thanks to everyone involved. So I'm just wondering about whether there is, now that things have improved, whether there's an opportunity, I don't know whether you do this already, but opportunity to extend the compliance checks to those that are in our landlord licensing scheme that would be private landlords, or to offer that as part of their application, or that is a mandatory requirement now and we bump up the cost and we cover the costs, whatever it is. So we now know that also those in the landlord licensing scheme have fully compliant properties, because I don't know if we really have that that safety knowledge yet, do we? I don't think so. So maybe that's a takeaway, but I think that would be something that's useful to look at. And also just wondering what sort of awareness tenants are made about the compliance or non-compliance, hopefully compliance, of their properties, and what they can do to maintain compliance or not compromise, but also to immediately flag to the right people should they have any concerns, because it's not necessarily something that's sort of to go to their housing officer or a repair issue or whatever. You know, if they say, I don't think someone's checked my electrics in a year, where are they going to? And you can then refer and say, actually, we did come on this date or whatever. Thanks. Sarah, I was talking to them. I should have been directing.
No, I was just going to say on the, I'll come in just quickly on the landlord licensing schemes. And I think with the Renters' Rights Bill, I think there's going to be a lot of shift going on in that sort of space, which, I mean, at the moment we discount better EPC ratings in for the landlord licensing, for example, and that, yeah. So I think that's a watch this space area, I think. But on the, yes, yeah, definitely. So tenants' knowledge of compliance, I suppose, how rigorous is this? Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So one of the things that we've been focusing over the last 12 months was to transfer all of the certification that we had, whether it was from the supplier portal or whether we held it locally to a central system, which we've now got in place. Part 2 or phase 2 of that improvement plan is to then enable residents to access those certifications directly. So now that we've got everything in our system, we can run reports of the compliance system. We are now working towards giving residents the ability to access their certification for their property directly. In terms of what residents can do to try and improve the building safety, so for our high-rise buildings, we've already got nominated building safety managers, and the residents living in those blocks should know who the building safety managers are, and that should be the first point of contact. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the high-rise buildings, we're going to be installing specific building safety notice boards. There's various requirements under the Building Safety Act to improve communication and engagement with residents. Each building has a building-specific resident engagement strategy. So we'll be putting information about the boards up, and there'll be QR codes on there, which will get them through to systems to access or to email staff to get information. We do lots of promotion of safety checks in terms of smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, gas checks, electrical checks, the things we need to get into tenants' homes for through our tenants' newsletters. We write to them all as well. And as I say, in terms of the high rise, we publish information, and we are going to, through our access to our system, provide them to be able to go in and look at their latest information. Yeah.
Okay, so if we can move to the resolution 3.1 of the report, this is page 652. Do we all agree? I only heard one person. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Okay, item 19, which is procurement of client fit out items for the Haringey Civic Centre. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a report that is meeting the next vital stage in the development of our the refurbishment of our fantastic civic centre. And we've gone through various iterations, and now we're coming to the point when we are procuring for the fixtures, fittings and equipments and the concession for the cafe. So we're now getting down to the sort of detail of this whole process. We're absolutely committed to delivering the best value, saving the council as much money as possible. So where we can be reusing furniture, we will be doing that. We have to recognise, of course, the Grade 2 listed status of the building, and you know, that means that we will be having to buy some furniture that fits in with that forward-looking image, as well as recognising the value of the building and the architectural merit of that building. We've been involving local artists, or we will be involving local artists with competitions and curating installations. So we're very much involving the local community in the development of how the building will work into the future, and the use that residents will be able to make of the building, as well as it obviously being primarily a workplace and a place for civic decisions to be made, and for for, like I say, our staff and all of the decision-making process that we'll be going through. I'll leave it at that because there's lots of details in the report, and we do have officers here that have been working very, very closely with the project. We obviously have the cross-party working group that has been meeting on a regular basis, where they has been examining this process for a long time now. I think the next meeting is scheduled for December, I think. I'll just leave it at that, Chair, and see if there's any questions.
Any questions from the Cabinet? Okay, Councillor Cawley-Harrison.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. So I wasn't totally clear from the report was whether the estimated sort of total cost envelope for all these works falls within the sort of close to £70 million budget that was approved, I think, about a year ago now, or whether that's just for the development and this is now internal and a separate pot. So just how the two work together, basically. And then I suppose similarly to that, how does this compare to the kind of original budget, the capital allocation at the start of the project for fit out, whether we're kind of in line with that, or whether this is in line with the original estimate when the Civic Centre project was put together for the capital spend on these fit out works, or whether because of other factors, the listing or whatever else, we're now in a different place. And then just on the kind of the fit out items, whatever is going in, whether you have an expected life cycle for them. So, we're spending 10 million on them. They'll last 10 years. In 10 years' time, we've got to spend another 10 million. Or, and how that's factored into the investment strategy for it, if you like. Higher quality might last longer. And then you mentioned about you're having to source some items. You'll be delighted to know that the Hornsey Town Hall, which was sold by this council for 3.5 million in 2017, are not using all of their furniture that they put into storage when they acquired the Hornsey Town Hall. They have decided to procure some new furniture, and they're wondering what to do with their old listed furniture from the Hornsey Town Hall. So you may want to get in touch with FEC, and because as I understand it, they're looking at putting an auction on for those items and maybe giving it to charity. Not that I'd want us to take money from charity, but there may be an opportunity there for some items that may not quite match the period, but it's worth a conversation, I think, at least, isn't it?
Thank you. Sorry to make you repeat your questions. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. Yeah, we're on budget and on time. There's no extra expansion of the budget, but this is all part of it's all part of that same pot. Where we've had increased costs, we have managed that within so we've nipped and tucked wherever we can and made changes in some of the interior designs to make sure that we're not pushing that envelope out any further. So we have looked at every single penny to make sure that we don't push that out. In terms of the ongoing way in which the building is managed, then it will be the same it falls within our corporate property team, who will obviously have ongoing budgets for replacing things like we do with all of our buildings, and every single building has its own internal budget because things do wear out eventually and the equipment has to be replaced. So I can ask officers to add to that if they think that there's more detail that you might be interested in. And on your third point, we'll pick up on whether there's any furniture that we might want to take off the hands of FEC at the town hall in Hornsey. Is there anybody from the officer side that wanted to add, or Jess, did you want to add?
No, I think we covered it. We have maintenance projects.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll return to the resolutions after considering exempt information on item 28. Item 20, which is the Wards Corner Asset Management Plan. Over to you again, Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this paper is Wards Corner
asset management plan. It's reiterating our commitment to the Ward's Corner as an area, and Seven Sisters in particular being a gateway that has to the borough. You know, it's an entrance point to our borough that we feel is really important, and we've been aware for some time. As you know, I've come many times to this cabinet meeting to talk about what we're doing in the Ward's Corner area to improve the look and feel of the place to the best of our ability. Not all of those sites are under our control, and we, you know, we had hoped at some stage that we could put we could redevelop part of the Ward's Corner site. It soon became quite clear, I think, that you know, in a post era after the Liz Truss budget, that all new developments were struggling, and this was certainly one of them. And there isn't a development plan that we can find to be viable for this particular site. However, that doesn't mean to say that our commitment to improving the area in terms of an asset management plan, making sure that we can lease out properties that we do own, improve those properties that we do own, and remove some of the blight from the area. And obviously what we've been working on in the last several years is making sure that the vibrancy of that area is brought back to life through the return of the traders at Ward's Corner Market, and that has been a tremendous success. Anybody that's been down there can see that the trade has absolutely come back with a bang. That it's always busy down at that market, even though it's only just reopened, and there's been loads of activities taking place around Halloween, for example, and there's going to be more activities that take place around the Christmas holiday period as well. So I suppose this paper is first of all stating that we're not able to be at this point in time redeveloping the site. We can't get a viable scheme on that site, but it reiterates our commitment to the area in terms of placemaking and improvements to some of the commercial properties that we are responsible for, and continuing to work with Places for London and the market traders to keep Seven Sisters changing, if you like, in improving that corner of our borough that is essential to all the visitors that come through Seven Sisters and so on. So I'll leave it at that and wait for any questions.
Any questions from the cabinet? No. Councillor Crawley-Harrison.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. In terms of kind of learning exercise, I'm just wondering whether you have now worked out, identified kind of what the total spend has been since the commencement of the whole CPO process to the lapsing of the CPO, or the imminent lapsing of the CPOs, or CPO, I should say, you know, when you include the legal costs, management costs, all of that sort of thing. I should imagine it's been quite expensive, and how we can, I suppose, if we go through a similar process in future, what our stops are, you know, that sort of learning process I'd like to think we are doing or have done. And similarly, those properties that have been, as far as I'm understanding, have been acquired, for example, from Granger during the last, whatever it is now, however many years, again, whether we acquired at a certain price and that value has retained, or whether actually the value was at such a price because of the plans that are, you know, put on hold for now, and where that sits within your corporate strategy plan for future, for example, Station Road or other sites where there's a site allocation. And then just on the viability, just wondering how often you've been assessing the viability, whether that's been like an annual thing for the last 5 years, or there was a viability assessment done at the front. There's obviously been a lot of things happening. It's been a, you know, real changing environment there. And then now you've done a new viability assessment, and it's only just become non-viable, or whether it's been non-viable for a period. just how that all fits together, really.
Thank you. I don't know how many viability assessments that have been done on that side. It's definitely more than one. I don't think it's ever been. I suppose first of all, I would say that almost every scheme that I've been involved in, the first viability assessment is hardly ever washing its face, and you get there usually by hook or by crook to some way in which you can make it a viable scheme. So that happens in every placemaking regeneration scheme that you would go through in any case. When we first looked at a scheme for that Wards Corner site, and bearing in mind that we don't own all of that site, it's owned by Places for London in part, on the corner in particular, and the ownership that came to us after the Granger scheme fell apart, then that we've looked at loads of different ways in which to make that work, none of which worked then. But once we had the trust budget, then obviously things got worse, as they have done for many developers. So it didn't get any better, and at the moment we're thinking it's not likely to get any better unless somebody's going to tell me that interest rates are going to go back to the historically low rates that they were just a couple of years ago, before trusts managed to wreck the economy. So I think that it's not likely that we're going to come to a viable scheme that we could therefore justify the continuation of the CPO. I can ask officers to come in with any details of the costs that we've spent, but again, in order for us to make any exploration of any site, you have to spend some money to make that exploration. That is just part of the burden of doing that in the first place, but you can't do it without spending any money. So I'll maybe leave it to officers to come in, and if there's any detail they can share with that.
So in terms of viability checking, it's done regularly. I wouldn't say it's necessarily once a year, but we reviewed viability in 24 and 25. So, we've been quite cognizant of the fact that the viability has been an issue for some time. In terms of costs, yes, they've all been tracked and we're all aware of them. We can write to you with further detail of that. Obviously, part of the work that we are doing currently is closing out the sort of compensation legacy that the CPO carries.
I just wanted to just reassure yourself and cabinet members as well that we are still working really closely with Places for London, because the whole ideas around the community plan are focused on the corner building, which is in the holdings of Places for London, and we meet regularly with Places for London and with the traders to discuss how we can help getting those plans forward. There is one small part of the site that we own that we've sort of got on loan to Places, so that for use of the temporary market at the moment, and it's potentially that there may be some plans that Places can come up with along with the traders, and that's what we're discussing. So it isn't that everything's dead in the water. We are still finding ways and means, and in addition to that, every single commercial building or accommodation that is owned on that is going through the process of what is the best way of getting value for money for the council, where we can smarten shops up that we own and let them out. Obviously that's a good outcome for us, and that's what we're working for towards. If we feel that we have to dispose of things and that's the best way of removing the blight, then we will do that as well. So each unit has been assessed on its own merits.
Thank you. So we'll return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 29. Item 21, which is minutes of other bodies. Can we please note the minutes of the Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee and Cabinet member sign-ins? So can we please note those? Noted, thank you. Item 22, which is significant and delegated actions. Can we please note the significant and delegated actions taken by directors, pages 727 to 730. Item 23, new items of urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business. So item 24, which is exclusion of press and public. So items 25 to 30 allow for consideration of exempt information in relation to items 10, 11, 17, 19, 20 and 6. So can I please move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider this information defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do we all agree? Okay, so I'm formally closing the public section of this meeting. Thank you.